Hi everyone, I'm Stephanie Weaver. Welcome back to the Blue and Yellow Kitchen. In each episode, I make a dish inspired by a new book while talking to its author. Today's book is Black Smoke, African Americans and the United States of Barbecue, and I'm making mashed potato salad. I'd like to welcome Adrian Miller, the soul food scholar, James Beard Award winner, and the author of Black Smoke. Welcome, Adrian. We're so happy to have you in the kitchen.
Oh, thanks. It's good to be with you.
So we know your schedule for the book, which is coming out, is this is launch week for you, and we're super excited about that. Tell us what the book's about.
So Black Smoke is a celebration and part restoration. So it's a celebration of African American barbecue culture, and then it's a restoration of African Americans to the barbecue story in the United States because for a lot of reasons, African Americans have been pushed to the sidelines.
That's great. And so how long did it take you to research the book?
So I would say technically 6 years. I was doing it kind of part-time, so this was spread out over, but if you condensed all of the time, I would say 6 years.
Okay, great. And what inspired you to write it? Why did you decide on barbecue? What was your first book that you won the James Beard for?
Soul Food was a book on the history of soul food.
Okay, so you're a culinary historian, and African American food is your kind of bailiwick. But why barbecue? What was it about barbecue?
Well, it was born out of tragedy. Basically, I was watching a lot of food media, TV shows, print media, all this kind of stuff. And I just noticed that African Americans were not included in the storytelling. And that was just really weird to me because barbecue is a huge part of African American food culture. And it's certainly part of my culture, a big part of it. And so I was just wondering, why were African Americans being excluded? And so as I did more and more research, I just saw that the problem was really pronounced. So I just said, okay, somebody's got to say, look, this is crazy. If y'all going to talk about barbecue in the United States, you got to include black people. And so I really wanted to write something that would tell the story and just really show why this has to happen, why barbecue media needs to be more inclusive.
That's great. And how is the book organized? So give readers a sense of what they're going to find in between the gorgeous cover of the book.
Yeah, so what I do is first of all, I just kind of say how I came to write this story. And then what was important to me is to really start with the Native American origins of barbecue, which I think has been lost. And so it was important to me to establish that and then show how this transitions to African Americans becoming barbecue's principal cooks. And then the rest of the book is really looking at different aspects of African American barbecue culture. So churches, the competition circuit, restaurants, is there a black barbecue aesthetic, the importance of sauce. And then at the end of the book, I talk about basically why the media has fallen down on representing African Americans when it comes to barbecue. And then the last chapter, I talk about the future of barbecue and just raise some questions about where African American barbecue may be in the future.
That's awesome. So I'm featuring the book, first of all, because it's beautifully written. And as you'll see when Adrian starts to read, he has a very fun tone and voice as an author, which is distinct. And so while it sounds like it's super scholarly, you'll actually see once he starts reading, it's very, very fun. I also loved that you introduced us to and named people whose stories have been lost, which I thought also Toni Tipton Martin did a beautiful job of that in her book Jubilee, which we featured last year.
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought that up because I keep forgetting to do that. I don't know why. But yeah, I try to raise people from barbecue history who really evoke the themes in each chapter. And I found these fascinating people, some people I'd never even heard of. Who just had fascinating stories. So it was an honor to share their stories. And then I also include 22 recipes.
Yeah. And so one of the things that I loved was reading those profiles and just recognizing that there are these names and faces that have been lost to history, but you've, brought them back. And so we can, recognize them and honor them. And I think that's part of the restoration that you were talking about, that there's been so many black stories that have been lost to history. And so scholars like yourself are doing a beautiful job of bringing them to our attention. So thank you for that. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Okay, so the recipe I'm making today is mashed potato salad, a different take on potato salad. And we chose it, well, first of all, because I don't have a grill. I'm going to just confess that right now. So there was no way most of the recipes were something I was going to be able to manage. But I also thought this chapter was especially fascinating. And I want, when Adrian sets it up, I'm going to have him sort of explain how the church and barbecue connection happens. While you're reading, I'm going to start mashing the potatoes, which have been cooked. They're russet potatoes. They've been boiled for about 15 minutes in salted water until they were fork tender. And then we'll talk about the recipe after he reads. So go ahead and set up what you're going to read, and then go ahead and read for us while I start mashing as quietly as I can over here.
All right, so this chapter is called Burnt Offerings, Barbecue and African American Church Culture. Before exploring other aspects of African American barbecue culture, it's important to consider its connections to religion. Barbecue is about building community, and the Black church was arguably the first autonomous institution shaped by African Americans in the United States. As we'll see, barbecue was useful in creating a multitude of believers. I begin by confessing, which seems entirely appropriate for a discussion of how barbecue and spirituality intersect. As a Christian and lifelong member of the African Methodist Episcopal Church, I bare my soul and share with you that barbecue has been quite distracting to my spiritual life. When I think about the book of Exodus from the Hebrew Bible, in which Moses encounters the burning bush, I wonder if it smelled like hickory, mesquite, or oak wood. Do you also wonder, as I do, if when the prophet Ezekiel had a vision of the valley full of dry bones, they looked like a pile of spare ribs? Does your mind wander whenever you read the words burnt offering in passages like this one from the prophet Micah in the Hebrew Bible? With what shall I come before the Lord and bow down before the exalted God? Shall I come before him with burnt offerings, with calves a year old? Will the Lord be pleased with the thousands of rams, with 10,000 rivers of olive oil? With that scripture, clearly the prophet Micah wrote of beef barbecue with a sauce, right? I mean, I know, I have problems, and I need spiritual and probably other forms of counseling.
Okay, so viewers, this is why you need to buy this book. Because Adrian is so charming and delightful and just lays down so much wisdom in such a fun way. So thank you for reading that. That was great. I'm going to ask you if these look mashed enough before I go any farther. How do those look?
Oh, got to raise it a little bit more. Can't see it. Okay, yeah, that looks good.
Okay, so we've got hand mashed potatoes, and we're going to start. So walk me through what we've got here in the recipe.
So we're going to have half a cup of mayonnaise.
Okay.
And then this was not in Rob Walsh's recipe, so this is kind of my spin because I like mustard in my potato salad. So 3 teaspoons of prepared yellow mustard.
Okay, so I'm just going to interrupt you for a second. So I'm using Creole mustard, which is what I bought for Tony Tipton Martin's show.
Oh, okay.
So I guess I'm adding a little bit of my own spin to your spin.
That's okay. That's all good, right?
All right, and then what's next?
So we want 2 green onions that are, sliced, thinly sliced.
Okay.
A tablespoon of pickle relish.
Pickle relish, there we go.
And then 4 teaspoons of pickle juice.
Okay.
And then 4 teaspoons of hot pepper sauce.
Okay. So I have homemade hot pepper sauce.
Very
it's
impressed.
made with habaneros, so it's very hot. And there's a little bit of spice in the Creole mustard, and I'm kind of a spice wimp. So I am going to taste it pre-hot sauce, and then I'm just going to add to taste so I don't kill myself. Being a wimpy white girl, I hope that's okay.
That's all right. I'm impressed that you make your own hot sauce and that it's habanero. I mean, that's no joke.
That is no joke. Oh, this isn't spicy at all, the Creole mustard. So what I'm just going to do is just do a very small amount of this, and then kind of taste and make sure I don't overdo it.
Yeah.
The habanero just makes such a beautiful color sauce. And I'm not quite at the Scotch bonnet level of sauce. I have some friends that are into that, but that's a little bit too hot for me.
Yeah, I got to hear you about Scotch bonnet and then ghost pepper. And then there's some even hotter chilies that I can't pronounce yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, there seems to be like an arms race.
It does. Well, when I did Mafe last year, I had Chef Dedisi Olatostin on, and I was like, dude, I can like do a quarter of a habanero in this, and otherwise I won't be able to eat it or taste it. And he's like, I understand, it's okay. So he was very understanding. All right. I think that's a good level of heat. So this is the nice thing about making your own food, right? Is you can adjust to taste. So some other people might want it hotter, but I'm going to go ahead and mix this in. So I mixed all the kind of saucy ingredients together just so that they would all be kind of nicely blended before I added them to the potatoes.
Yeah, and the other thing is, the recipe calls for salt to taste. And I don't know about you, but I've been undersalting my food of late. But yeah, salt to taste.
Yeah.
So I didn't put a set amount for that.
Yeah. So so I'm on a migraine relief plan that is low sodium for that health reason. So absolutely, I did use a little bit of salt in the water because it makes the potatoes taste better. But you could certainly, if you're following my plan, this is actually plan friendly except for the mustard. So you would, you could use a little dry mustard instead. And yeah, you could definitely adjust. And the thing that I love is you've got the hot pepper sauce, you've got mustard flavor, you've got the fresh green onions, you've got a little bit of pickle. And so all of those things are, okay, let me just have you take a look. How does that look?
That looks good.
Yeah, it looks right? Okay. Yay. That's what I like to hear.
Yep. So all you did is just, you just combine all of that with your mashed potatoes.
Yeah, I've never had this kind of hot sauce. This kind of potato salad. I'm very intrigued with it. Let me just wipe up my counter here and pull over. And I got, since it's the United States of barbecue, I have a red, white, and blue bowl.
Aw, look at you.
And you said it's served with a ice cream scooper, right? At the churches?
Yeah, at this particular church, they served it with the ice cream scoop, okay. Which I've seen that in a lot of places, even with regular potato salad.
Yeah. Well, it's just a food service kind of disher situation, but right. Yeah, it makes it look really pretty in the bowl. How's that?
Yeah.
All right.
I love that.
I'm excited to taste it, Adrian. All right, so tell us about the relationship between African American churches and barbecue, because we didn't really get into that yet.
Well, so by the time you get to the early 19th century, you see reports of large barbecues. And really two kinds of leaders figured out that barbecue was a great way to bring in a crowd. And those were politicians and faith leaders. And so the kind of the early connection with church was they used to have these things called camp meetings. And they were multi-day revivals. And essentially there'd be out in the woods someplace. And there would be several days of preaching and feasting. And barbecue was a great kind of attraction for these camp meetings because barbecue commands a community, right? Back in the day when you're doing whole animal cooking, if you actually went that process, you had a lot of food to feed a lot of people, otherwise it would spoil. And so that's kind of one of the connections. And then also after emancipation, when a lot of small churches were emerging, given the isolation of the rural South, the church was not only an important spiritual center, but it was also a social center. And so again, food was important, right? People would get soul food, quote unquote, for their spirit and edify their spiritual life. And then they would get, other kind of food afterwards, a different kind of soul food that was cementing community and was a chance for cooks to show off. And so again, barbecue was something that was very, very popular.
And so besides the meat and potato salad, what other sides would be served at a barbecue so people kind of paint the picture for us?
Oh, well, that's where you start to get into the fighting, because there's so many different regional styles. So the earliest barbecues that we hear about in Virginia and places like Kentucky, they often had a meat and vegetable stew that was served alongside it. So I don't know if you've ever heard of Brunswick Stew.
No.
So Brunswick Stew is basically a chicken and vegetable stew. It was probably like a descendant of a hunter stew because some of the early recipes talk about squirrel. being in there instead of chicken. And then in Kentucky, there's something called burgoo, which is very, it's a very similar meat and vegetable stew. And so, so we see those stews. And then later, as we see more kind of Germans settling in the American South, their salads become popular. So obviously potato salad, coleslaw, and then baked beans becomes a side as well. But when you fast forward to this time, a lot of Black-run barbecues, whether it be in a restaurant or just a community, they often have soul food sides. So I've seen greens, macaroni and cheese, cornbread, and depending on where you are, you might see like dirty rice and other things show up as side dishes.
Great.
And then, in the very fancy places, you're starting to see like things like Brussels sprouts as a barbecue side.
Nice. So you can see, readers and viewers, that that there's just this beautiful wealth of information and really tasty information as well. I'm going to just give you take another quick little taste and just describe the salad. So it's super creamy because it is a mashed potato, right? So it's got that mashed potato consistency. I'm getting a very small, light hint. I thought it would be much more mustardy than it is. It's just kind of a nice back note on it. I'm tasting the green onions, tasting a little pickle relish. The hot sauce is there, but it's not too strong. And yeah, it's just delightfully creamy, so I will definitely be making this again. I was telling Adrian, my family history is primarily German, so I've never met a potato salad that I did not like. I like them all. I love them all. I will not fight. I'll just have all of them. There's no need to fight about who's right. So great. So tell us, was anything particularly difficult for you to learn or to work through in this, or do you have a favorite kind of character or moment in the book before we go?
Well, let me talk about two things. So
okay.
One, in terms of the difficult part, I thought it was important to show kind of the difficult story of barbecue. And so you see all these examples where enslaved people were tortured, basically using barbecue. So they were thrown into pits. Some were whipped, and then with the emerging scars, barbecue sauce, basically vinegar and red pepper. That was the earliest barbecue sauce, was poured into the wounds. And a lot of euphemism for lynching, if fire was involved, was called barbecue. So I thought it was important for people to see the nefarious side of kind of barbecue culture and how that played out as well. So that was difficult to read these oral histories of enslaved people and find stories like that. So that was difficult. On the kind of positive, glorious side, the people I got introduced to were just fascinating. And one person I keep thinking about is a woman named Marie Jean, or Mary John anglicized. Marie Jean would be her French name. So she was in antebellum Arkansas when it changed from being like Spanish and French and then eventually English. And she was what we would call a pitmaster today. Now, I don't really like that term for a lot of reasons, but back in her day, she was called a superintendent. So people that were in charge of barbecues were typically called superintendents. And so we get accounts of her in the 1840s being a superintendent at barbecues. And so just let that register, right? Let that sink in. You got a black woman telling dudes what to do when it comes to barbecue in the 1840s. And eventually she buys her freedom. And so she ends up running a restaurant in the Arkansas Post, which was kind of the first settlement in that area, like English settlement. I should say European settlement because it was French, Spanish, and English. And when she dies, the white newspaper eulogizes her. Now, there's a little bit of racism in that eulogy, but still, they are singing her praises. And so we don't know much about her, but just that the tidbits we get points to an extraordinary life.
Adrian, thank you so much for that, and for your book, which really expresses the pain and joy and the breadth of the African American experience. And we appreciate you being here in the kitchen today. Thank you for joining us. Yeah. You'll find the recipe link in the Facebook video or on my website, migraine-relief-recipes.com. You're going to find Adrian at soulfoodscholar.com. And if you enjoyed the show, please share it with a friend. Order a copy of Black Smoke wherever you like to buy books. If you aren't able to buy books, please support an author by asking your local library to carry it, because that also helps us too. Follow me at sweavermph so you don't miss an episode, and join us next time for another author interview and a dish inspired by their book. Thanks so much for watching The Blue and Yellow Kitchen.